G'day, welcome back. Today we're looking at the blunders in the next World Chess Championship match, which is the one between Botvinnik and Bronstein in 1951. It's going to be a bit more return to normal. The last video was tournament match in 1948. That was quite difficult to analyze, but now we're just back into match play between these two players, and we'll be using the charts we're all familiar with. Okay, so let me switch over to the analysis board. And I've just brought up Wikipedia here, just using this as a bit of a sort of a learning experience for the background to the matches. Now, a bit of background, if you remember, Alekhine died. They had the tournament in 1948, which Botvinnik won. And then after that, they've now got quite a good system of, previous candidates, winners are seeded, and you get new candidates from the interzonals, and they have playoffs, and you get a World Chess Championship contender out of the end of it. Now, if we look at this, we can see a lot of the big names now from the post-World War II era are starting to pop up. We already saw, for instance, Keres, Botvinnik, and Smyslov last time, and now we're seeing Bronstein, who challenges this match, Boleslavsky, Kotov, Naidorf makes an appearance, Gligerik, player for quite some time in the future, and so you had the interzonal, and then we had the candidates, which Bronstein and Boleslavsky are tied for, and there was a match between them, which Bronstein just won, and then he had the match. So this is famous. We can close Wikipedia now. Famous for being a match which is tied back in the days where a tie meant the champion kept his title. Okay, now we can see there I've got my normal match profile on the top right. And Botvinnik is red and Bronstein is blue, and you can see that it was very tightly matched all the way through the games, and Bronstein was actually leading after 22 games, and then he lost a game, drew a game, and then that was it. It was a tie, and he was not world champion, and he never played in the World Championship again, although he was a player in the candidates, for instance, famously in 1953 Zurich, where he wrote one of the tournament books. Right, so let's start looking at the games. I'm going to look at games 6, 10, 16, and 17. There are a couple of others which I'm going to skip, but I think 4 games is enough to look at for one match in terms of blunders. And the first one we're going to look at is a absolute corker. It is in game 6. Let me just load it up. You can see actually it doesn't actually show up in the profile because this was blunder by Bronstein, and he just resigned after Botvinnik's reply. And when I've done my analysis, or one weak point sometimes the analysis sometimes doesn't analyze the very last position, so I'm going to have to fix that. So I'll just bring up the position. Here we are. We'll go backwards and forwards a little bit just to understand the position a bit better. But here is the game position. What happened is that white, Bronstein, played king c2. Let's just put that on the board. Okay, well, that's showing you something, but never mind. Right, so king c2 is a blunder. Why is it a blunder? Botvinnik replied, and Bronstein then resigned. Okay, if you had a little bit of time to look at it. I think everybody thinks that Bronstein was expecting a new variation, king to f3, in which case the knight can make it back, threatening a check there, so he'll be able to stop the pawn. What did actually happen? Go back to this position here, king c2. Haven't seen it already. Botvinnik just played king g3, and now it's dead lost because there's no checking route for the knight to get back. White cannot stop the pawn. March in here, and we'll queen, and that will be it. Fault here is we'll go back to this position. Actually, go back to this position here, and in fact, there are various ways of drawing in this position already, and then I think maybe Bronstein got a bit too ambitious rather than playing like. If you look at the maybe a more comfortable way of drawing is, for instance, you move the king over now, where you play knight d6, so it's getting back into the zone, right? But playing knight d8, you really put yourself on the edge. You answer e3 with the correct move, knight e6 check, and if the king advances, then the knight blocks from d4, and the line given by the computer is king e5, and well, the knight blocks from d4 anyway, so that just holds it all up, and it's a draw, right? So that was really shocking, and basically what was going on. Then we go back to the key position. I'm sorry, I'm dwelling on this a little bit. These two squares here, and Bronstein was relying upon Botvinnik moving to f3, whereas in fact, as we know, with sorry, this is like the chess distance is the same distance. Black's just trying to get to f2, and he can go the longer route, avoid the check, and win the game. Right. So that was a really bad blunder, and in fact, all the commentary say then Bronstein lost game 7 because he was so upset at the error he'd made, because it's just a very, very, very elementary error. Okay, so let's now move along to game number 10. So you can see the profile of the game there, and around about move 45, there was a blunder by Botvinnik, who was black, and the game was drawn when he should have won. So let's go to the relevant position and have a look what's happening. Right. Okay, this is kind of a key position. And you look at it, black has quite a decent advantage here. The bishop's quite restricted. The black knight is going to have some nice juicy squares to sit on. That's kind of what the computer assessment is. Just consider the position a bit and have a look, consider what you would do in this position. Okay, if you've done that, there's actually one winning line. Let's go through that. Bishop is poorly positioned, and this is what Botvinnik should have played. Corral the bishop. If the bishop goes in the corner, it's going to be trapped, basically. So in this line, you can see black keeps his kingside pawns secure, and the knight is going to hop into key squares like that, and a lot of those pawns are going to drop. Okay, so let's have a look what happened in the game. Botvinnik black played knight b7, and so what's the problem with that? Well, now there's this pressure on those pawns, and because the knight's not able to cover f8 square, black has to give up some pawns to proceed, and actually just sort of ended there, right? So he lost his chance to sort of kind of trap the bishop and use the advantage of the very active knight and the weak pawns on white squares. So that wasn't a particularly bad blunder, but certainly a missed opportunity. Right, so now we're going to move along to game 16. Let me load that one up. Right, okay. Once again, you can see the profile, and it looks again like it was a Botvinnik comfortably winning and making some errors, and it ended up a draw. So let's go to the key position here. This will do. Okay, so you look at this position. White bishop's pretty horrible. Black's got the double pawns. He's got 2 extra pawns on the queen side, and I think the main thing is that the knight is just absolutely dominating. e4 square supported. Okay, let's just have a look. Have a look at the position. We'll go through the game continuation. Rook takes g3 check. Yeah, tell me what's wrong with that. Well, the problem with it is it only gives you a draw. Yeah, so obviously take it. Rook. Must have been miscalculation by Botvinnik in this position, because there's nothing better than a perpetual check here, because the knight could check on f2, but they just get picked off by the rook, and then you're not going to win that position with both kings so exposed. So the way this is a blunder, it's just like this rook takes g3 check from this position was, just extremely bad. I mean, I think it must have been some miscalculation. And for instance, we'll go through a computer line. Rook takes d4, just pick up another pawn, right? And maybe white picks up a pawn. This like a nice position, drive the rook off the c file, and if he takes, well, then you just end up with, two protected passed pawns, which obviously decide the game. Dominate the white queen. Prove the king position. Queens get traded off, and this is just going to be a trivial win, like +5 according to the computer, right? So why he sacrificed the rook in the exchange? Probably thought he had a winning attack, didn't. So no, that was pretty bad. And now the last game for today. Let me just load that one up. This is game 17. Right. Okay. So this is, you say it was fairly important in the game position, because basically Botvinnik just blew the game. Right, and it's kind of, it was wide. Should have been a draw, and then, well, maybe not should have been a draw. He's a little bit worse off, and then he just blew it. Now this has a lot of heavy pieces on the board. Let's go to the relevant position. I mean, black looks better, I guess. I mean, white has a pawn which is protected by a well-entrenched knight, and but black's got also a well-entrenched knight. White bishop looks bad. And got a couple of nice pawns, so maybe there's some advancing opportunities on the queen side. Anyway, it's some small advantage to black is the way you'd call this position. A lot of moves, sort of +1 to black. Okay, so please tell me what's wrong with knight to f6 check. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the pawn is pinned. That just blunders the knight. Now the game's completely lost. Botvinnik resigned. That was really terrible. right? Now, because the problem is that you can't actually take the queen, because, it's easily going to be even made. Queens will come off, rook and knight. So, yeah, just wonder how that happened. It was a really poor play by Botvinnik. Anyway, so it didn't affect the overall match in the end because he still managed to draw the match. Just to wrap up for today, what I'll do is I will bring up the tier list and we will add those games in. And I've also in the background I've been adding some of the other games in as we've been going along. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I brought up my tier list and you can see what's happened since last time. If you have a look down here, there's a lot of the Reshevskys, Keres, and Botvinnik from 1948 because they were kind of averagey type errors. Got a couple of birds up here with the Botvinnik 1951, that's from the one I just looked at. Botvinnik 1951, and so Botvinnik 1951, so 3 of those errors, those last 3 games we looked at, they're fine. You can see also a lot of Alec Hines and Bogolubovs and Irvs and so on, right? So I've filled in all the recent blunders, which, as you can see, a lot of them are 2, 3, a couple of 4 stars, but nothing too off the planet. But what we'll see here is the biggie, this 1951 error by Bronstein, the King C2 move, which basically blundered an easily drawn game, and who knows what difference that would have had on the match. The tier list, and I think that's all we want to look at today. So it's good to be back in normal sort of match events. And next time we'll be looking at Botvinnik versus Smyslov in the first of their sort of swathe of matches they have in the mid-1950s. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.